Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of innova, alive and composing with today's guest, David Kechley. Would you pronounce your name correctly for the record?
Yes, you did it perfectly, David Kechley.
And you've got a beautiful home there as far as I can see, and maybe birds tweeting in the background. Do you have any pets or household animals? What are their names, and if so, why?
I do not have any pets. I had hamsters when I was little. That was an interesting thing. And I've got dogs and cats. And I've been accused of hating cats, but I think it's just my girlfriend's cat that I don't like. I like cats, okay. So I think it's really kind of a little too much responsibility for me right now, because I feel like every time I would leave the house, I'd have to worry about it. But I think at some point I might get a dog again, because a sort of medium-sized, laid-back dog would be good. I've heard people live longer, too. You know?
And does this reflect your jet-setting lifestyle and your commitment to multiple students at all hours of day and night, and your own compositional things?
I mean, I would say the commitment to the students part, that would be a little overstated maybe, but even if you're gone for a weekend, when we did have dogs back in the day, I do remember it was a real hassle sometimes to figure out what to do with them, and maybe we didn't have the right kind. Maybe we needed the kind that you could just leave them in the house and they wouldn't tear everything apart. I'm looking forward to that possibility. But and I've done a lot of traveling this year because I've been on leave from my teaching, and it was great to be able to just pick up and go for a week or two, anytime. So so I'm on a hiatus from pets right now.
And where is it that you teach that has such lovely leaves in the background? It doesn't look like Manhattan, for instance.
No, it's Williamstown, Massachusetts, and I teach at Williams College, small liberal arts college in the Berkshires. I've been here for like 26 years, I think. It's a nice place, and it's not actually like I live out in the woods completely, but it's like 5 minutes from campus, but it's nice. It's very rural. I like it. It's about 3 hours from New York. It would be nice if there was a train that could just take me there right away, but I get down there occasionally. So,
do you think this locale and the people around you have worked into your compositional life? Is there like a give and take? Is this place a natural habitat for your kind of music?
I don't know what's a natural habitat for my kind of music. I think the thing mostly is the people that I work with. I don't think sometimes I hear the birds in the morning and at night, and I kind of think, wow, that would be kind of cool to try to capture that. I guess I do that somewhat, but no, it's more like, you have colleagues that take an interest in your music, and you like the way they play, and so a lot of the pieces I've written over the last 25 years were kind of inspired by colleagues or friends of the colleagues or something like that. And actually, I always kind of thought I wanted to teach at a big music conservatory, because it seemed like there would be a lot going on, and you'd sort of, all your music would be played all the time. But I actually kind of like this better, because it turns out there's plenty going on, and it also turns out that you kind of have to force yourself to sort of go outside that little bubble, because it's a little bit too small to sustain you the whole time. Whereas I think at conservatory you could kind of be happy, year-round, hearing your music played in the conservatory and never worry about where else it was being played. At least that's kind of the way I've seen it. But then I ended up here kind of by accident, too. So, you take the cards you're dealt with. But these were pretty good cards, actually.
Keeping your composer-teacher hat on for a moment, what's your lineage? What did you learn from your mentors, and what do you try to pass on as critical information to your own students?
Well, first of all, I should say that my dad is a composer, and I say he is a composer because he's 93 and he's still cooking along pretty good. He lives out in Seattle, and so I really think that was my probably reason for becoming a composer, is because I just kind of, when I was, 4, 3, 4, 5, something like that. I remember hearing him play on the piano, and he would play these passages like over and over again, which is kind of funny to hear, because it would just be this, it would kind of be it would be like he was testing out the passages, but there was also the issue of whether he could actually play the passages. So, and I've done the same thing. It's kind of like you're almost practicing the passage on the piano as you play it, but you're also trying to decide whether you like it the way it is, and so you keep sort of changing it. But so I remember that, really well. And then when I was in high school, I started writing some pieces, and he actually kind of didn't encourage me. I think he sort of thought that if I was going to be a composer, I should really want to be a composer, and so he didn't really encourage me. And then kind of as I was a senior in high school, we had a little experience where he helped me stay up all night copying some parts for an orchestra thing, and ever since then we've been kind of like colleagues. It's kind of cool. But I had a lot of composition teachers too. Donald Erb was a great guy, and he, I think, he definitely pushed me in some directions that were good for me. I had other teachers too. I wouldn't mention any of the other ones specifically at this point, I think. Well, maybe Robert Soderbergh, actually, I would mention, because he actually said some things that stuck with me. Sometimes, and you asked about my students. Well, I don't know. I look at what they do. I try to help them. I try to figure out what they're trying to do and try to help them do it, rather than what I want them to do. But sometimes it's really hard, because you don't know. There's a fine line there. On the other hand, I think once in a while I'll say something, and I don't think it's very important, and then a student will come back a few years later and say, "Oh, I remember when you told me X and Y, and that was a very influential statement." So I think these things just happen kind of a little bit by accident, as long as your intentions are good and you're doing your best to help them figure out what they're trying to do with their music.
How are you like your music? Is there something about the way you appear, the way you sound, the way you are in your life, psychologically, compared to what we hear?
Well, this new CD, which maybe you're going to ask me about, would be one example of how I'm kind of a frustrated drummer, because I really like to write for percussion, and I have I think a pretty good appreciation for the subtleties of what you can do with it. So I definitely like rhythm. But as far as, my personality, I don't think that I usually get ever as angry as sometimes my music gets, but I do get, I think, as sad as some of my music gets. And I think, I don't know, I think I have a sort of sense of, I don't know, something outside myself. I don't know what you want to call it, spiritual or whatever, and I try to kind of go there with the music.
And we're seeing a nice gesture there with your left arm, as though to make that physical connection. So thank you for doing that. How does your art make a difference in the world? Why is it important? Why do you do it?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, because, and for me, there are times when I think it doesn't make any difference at all, and I'm thinking this is a lot of work. Why am I doing this? And I think as you get older, that's maybe a little more true, for me at least, because when you're younger, you have a huge amount of energy, and you say, well, I'm going to write this symphony, and you spend 6 months on it, and you're really excited about it, and then it gets played maybe badly, maybe well, and somehow you kind of, I don't know, the whole process just seems really great, and then later, many years later, you spend 6 months writing a symphony, and they play it well or badly, and especially if they play it badly, you go like, whoa, what was that? So I'm actually not trying to be negative about it, but I do think as you progress through the years, your reasons probably change. I really like working with people playing the music, so I think that's the thing that keeps me going. And if my art affects anybody or changes the world or whatever, I think it would more probably be the people that are playing my music rather than the people that hear it, sort of, well, even in a concert or on a CD. Although, it's great when people come up and say, I really love that piece. And it's even okay when they say they hated it, as long as they have some passion about it. But I think that mostly it's working with performers. And my most greatest experiences have been working with 2 or 3 performers in trios and duos and things like that. I love writing orchestra music. I will always want to do that, and I always will do it, I think. It's a huge hassle, of course, getting it played, and it's very rewarding in a way, but it's also not so rewarding in the sense that you're dealing with this huge institution rather than individual people. Even though there's a conductor, you're working with and everything like that. There's something about working directly with the performance is really great, and that's what keeps me going.
Tell me about Kyoto. Apparently you went there and you had a marvelous time.
Yeah.
And it opened up thoughts in your life and in your art. And yet I hear such a voracious appetite for everything musical and artistic, which you have synthesized into your own voice. I'm not necessarily hearing Kyoto. Can you hear that? And tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I went to Japan. The whole family went to Japan back in the early 90s, and we actually lived in Matsumoto because my wife was studying the Suzuki method. So that was the deal, and I had a leave from. I think it was a half a year at that point, I think, yeah. And so I said, great, I mean, we'll go to Japan, I can write music in Japan. I didn't have any real plan. And then I did get associated with a school up in the area of Kyoto, so I visited Kyoto a bunch of times. It's a fabulous, I mean, if you ever go to Japan, you have to go to Kyoto, because it was the capital of Japan for something like 900 years before Tokyo was. And to me, it's kind of like Florence, only it's in Japan. I mean, in the sense that it has so much art and architecture there. So I saw a lot of things there, including the famous Ryoanji Temple. I returned back to the United States, and so there wasn't really any influence at that point. But then when I returned back to the United States, I had to write this guitar and saxophone piece, which I had agreed to write. And then I decided, I really don't want to, this doesn't sound like much fun. It sounds like a real, difficult project I don't think I want to do. But I had to, so I started working on it. And I had a really, really hard time just getting it going. The name of the piece is In the Dragon's Garden. And it was named that because partway through this process, I started kind of coming up with these ideas that were sort of repeated patterns. They were sort of, minimalist in a sense. And at that point, I hadn't really gone much into that direction at all. And so all of a sudden, I started doing all these guitar patterns. And it reminded me, there's a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, which back in the 70s, which I read. And there's a famous scene in there where this person that has writer's block, he keeps narrowing down the topic and narrowing it down. So pretty soon she's writing about a brick in the wall of this town. She was going to write a history of the town. She ends up writing about a brick. And all of a sudden the writing just kind of starts to flow. And it's just this kind of, cathartic moment. And I kind of had a little bit of that because all of a sudden this thing was really working. And I was like, wow, this is totally different than anything I've ever done, but I think it's really going to work. And so I finished the piece and sent it to the performers, and the guitar player called me later and he said, I can't figure this out because I can't play this. It's too difficult. It's impossible. It's stretching my mind. And it's just because it was repeated patterns, but none of them were really repeated. Anyway, to kind of shorten the story, he did play it. They did play it, and they premiered it at World Saxophone Congress in Italy. And I thought, nobody's ever going to play this again because it's way too hard. And in fact, a lot of people played it. I got it on a CD sometime later. And so In the Dragon's Garden is definitely one of my turning point moments. And you asked about Kyoto. I mean, hopefully I'm making it clear that when I was working on this, I started thinking back about that Ryoanji Temple and the whole notion of how these Japanese gardens are put together in a random, it's random, it's kind of a planned randomness, let me put it that way. And Monet was really big on that too when he would paint his gardens. So I didn't really get the influence of Kyoto until I had this other experience and I got back, and then all of a sudden it all sort of made sense. So I think that's the way it works sometimes when you travel. You're not immediately affected by the thing so much as later on.
Sadly, that piece is not on your Innova CD, but you do have a wonderful CD called Colliding Object. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe mention one or two of your favorite tracks on it for us to listen to.
Well, okay, Colliding Objects, it's the first CD I've done in about 10 years, and doing CDs is a lot of, well, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of kind of preparation, it's a lot of organization. And so finally I got this one together, and I've got a couple of more coming, so now that it's been 10 years. Well, this one is named after the final piece, which is the final 3 tracks. The piece is called Colliding Objects, Interactions for Piano and Percussion. I had a really good time with that piece. I like that piece a lot. I mean, I like most of the pieces on here. I mean, if I said I didn't like the pieces, you'd say, well, why are they on there? But I like the colliding objects because it's a duo. Like I said before, I really had a good time working with Doris Stevenson and Matt Gold, the two performers. And Matt Gold is a percussionist that will pretty much try anything. And I mean, he loves the challenge. And Doris, as a pianist, is also actually like that. And but also has roots in the classical piano world. So I asked her if she would be willing to play some percussion as well as the piano, and she said she would. So I had her playing inside the piano and playing percussion instruments along the way. And I really liked the way it came out. And interestingly, it kind of relates to the story I just told you about in the Dragon's Garden, because the opening section of that piece is another kind of planned randomness kind of thing where these patterns sort of keep folding on each other, just like the rocks in the garden, which are kind of sort of set around. The big rocks are set around in the gravel in a kind of a random way. So interestingly, I picked. I didn't really know I was going to say that when you asked the question, but all of a sudden I realized that actually kind of relates back pretty well. And it's definitely the most substantial piece. It's the longest piece, I think. It's 3 movements, but it's played continuously without pause, which again is kind of like in the Dragon's Garden. But I also put some other pieces on that I've wanted to have on a CD for a while, and the first 4 tracks are a piece I wrote in 1982, which is completely a percussion piece. So I'm really kind of happy that it sort of has a nice, in terms of chronology, a kind of a nice feel to it. There's the only non-percussion piece on there is a harp and flute piece, but it's pretty percussive actually in the way it's done. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, that's wonderful, and we wish you every success for colliding objects and the airwaves as they hit people's eardrums. And thanks a lot for talking with us today, David.
Well, thank you very much.